Yeah, I heard.
Did you go to school for this? This is all on-job training. Coming into here, I hold a Bachelor of Arts in History.
Oh, okay, all right.
So when I grew up in Shamokin, there was sulfur in the creek. Not too much of that?
Now it's going to be mostly diluted with a whole lot of iron oxide,
Yeah.
other chemicals still left in the mines. You especially see that in the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton region in Luzerne County, where most of those mines are under the river or right at the edge of it. All right, if everyone just wants to come on down here, this will offer you the best spot for looking as well as photo taking. I just prefer everyone try and keep off of the deck boards if you can over there for safety's sake. All right, so, given the context and history we've talked about so far, I should say I've talked about, you may think that healthcare didn't matter too much down here in the mines. Well, for a time, it didn't even exist. Prior to the 1890s, let's say, for example, that there's a miner working back in the chamber we just came from. He's fallen, and he's gotten hurt in such a way now that he's been immobilized. Maybe he broke a bone. Either way, he can't move. What is going to happen? Whoever should be working with that miner is going to do their best to get him to the base of his chamber, or the safest place they could stow him. They may try to help his injury, but wherever that miner is left now after he gets hurt is where he will now be staying until the end of the shift. So if he had been gotten hurt in hour 1 of 10, not only do I hope he can get comfortable, I hope that miner is still in one piece. Now, as a result of working conditions such as those and many social and economic factors back out on the surface, we experienced major strikes and walk-offs in our region in the 1800s into the turn of the century into the 19s. Most famously, 1902. 1890s, I meant to say earlier. I apologize. These strikes and walk-offs were done largely at the behest of the UMWA, the United Mine Workers of America, one of the first major labor unions and movements in our nation's history. Now, for more in-depth on that, I would point you to the movie that's available to watch back in the museum. These strikes and walk-offs were the union's way of lobbying for several key points. The two most important of which would have been, number one, a more standard form of pay. As understand in many cases, these miners were not even paid in an actual legitimate form of money. Maybe you've heard of the company script. Paper notes that the miners are paid that they can only spend in the stores that were owned and operated by the company that they worked for. Now, while that was the case for some mines, throughout a majority of the region, here for example, they worked based on a form of a credit system, where the company would actually deduct their expenses from their pay before they even issued it to the miner. And for a better breakdown of that, I would point you to the company store exhibit back in the museum, the one with the mannequin, because that actually goes through the numbers of that paycheck. That is the big reason why we saw such a prevalence of children working in these mines, is the families needed every cent and resource they could coming into the home. Because let's say, for example, the miner who got hurt back in the chamber doesn't make it. What's going to happen? The exact same thing. They're going to leave his body here inside of the mine until the end of the shift. Remember what I said all the way back in the beginning, is that the coal is what matters the most? Why load up a car full of wounded men or bodies when it could be rolling out of here carrying 5 to 6 tons? So now when the time does come around for that miner's remains to be removed, it is done so. And he is usually returned to his family how they found him. So I hope that miner had gone out in one piece. Most frequently, that involved them simply bringing the remains back onto the property and just leaving them there. Most commonly, the company men would leave the body on the front porch with a simple knock on the front door. I even had a guest on one of my tours tell me as such. I had an older woman explain to me when her grandfather passed away in a mine like this. When the time came for his remains to be removed, it was done so. The company men brought his body inside of the house and just left him on the dining room table. Now, should that family happen to be living in company-provided housing and the only person who had been working for the company was now deceased, that family usually had anywhere between 24 to 72 hours to replace him as a laborer inside of the mine, or they will be evicted from the home. Excuse me. Because the company owned that home. And if that family is not paying their expenses, well, they can be thrown out, and they will easily be replaced with another that will. Working for these mines often became a vicious cycle of debt and repayment. And when it became so extreme as to become never-ending, many today consider this to have been another form of indentured servitude, basically paid slavery. And even back then they were aware of such facts, because out of the numerous folk songs we have here in our region, most famous of which is probably 16 Tons. In that song is a lyric, "I owe my soul to the company store." And that was nowhere more so true for the immigrant miner, who had primarily been coming here from Europe at the time. The Dutch, Welsh, German, Polish, Czech, Slovak, Lithuanian, Italian, and especially the Irish. Now, as a result of all of those factors coming together, the other most important thing the union lobbies for is improvements to the working conditions of the miners. Amongst the things we start to see happening is actual hospitals being put into the mines. Now, your typical mine hospital looks nothing like this, instead being a simple stone or wooden shack built on a well-traveled walkway where they would have taken the wounded when they got hurt. May 1931, the Dr. Young Memorial Hospital is first opened, named in honor of Dr. J.H. Young, the LCNN, Lehigh Colon Navigation's company surgeon. Named in honor because Young took it upon himself to personally train the first on-hand staff that would have been able to take care of a hurt man when they brought him in here. Now, there's a point I want you to understand when I say that. Despite being called a hospital, you never saw an actual nurse or doctor anywhere near these mines. Instead, Young trained the foremans and other miners who were close by enough that when someone was hurt and they were available, they could help someone when they brought him here to what is arguably one of the most advanced hospitals you would have seen in a mine like this for that time. Because when this facility was running, it was painted sterile white and the interior kept as clean as possible. It had beds, cots, benches to get the wounded off their feet and off the floor. Those cutouts you may see in the walls held cabinets filled with any kind of supply they needed to stabilize an injury when it came in. And to help even the less medically educated accomplish that, this hospital had charts, graphs, diagrams, and books. And to help them do it cleanly and efficiently, this hospital, most importantly, had its own electricity and lights, its own running hot and cold water, and even held its own heat. Many lives were saved inside of these walls here, but understand many were also lost, because records by LCNN show we have 67 confirmed fatalities here underground. Men and children of all ages lost their lives working in these tunnels. The youngest on that record is a boy by the age of 15. He had been run over by a coal car. And in fact, that was the second leading cause of death, equipment-related fatality, right after roof tunnel collapse. Excuse me again.